day.
Hi Chris, yes, we're doing very well in Britain now for this lovely hot weather in September. We're in the sign of Virgo, and I'd like to say hello to all the fans out there, because we're gathering a bit of a fan base here with what I've been doing and with your videos that you've been taking of me, different subjects. And since we're in Virgo, anybody that wants a postal reading for the birthday year ahead from the tarot, this will be how to get in touch, and I'll send the form, which is the email address malcoj@blueyonder.co.uk, which is actually my husband's email, and he does all my admin for me. So don't be confused when you get a reply when it says Malcolm Jackson on it instead of Dale Jackson. But he does, he works the computer. I'm not very good with the computer, but I do write everything out longhand, and then he types it up for me and we put it into a package, and it's a document that goes out to people. But talking about writing things in longhand, I'm going today to talk to people about graphology. What does your handwriting say about you? Now, I was a graphologist, practicing graphologist, for 10 years, a number of years, back in 1980 something, early 90s, and did some broadcasting on the radio, BBC, doing some programs where people wrote letters in, and then on air live I would talk to people about their handwriting, which was in front of me, and talk about their things in their personality that people were fascinated about. But the business was also to do with recruitment. And today, with so much being in the recession period and people changing jobs and looking for new occupations or maybe retraining, handwriting analysis used to be used in this way to find people's potentials. And you can tell so much from handwriting. And these days we're losing this art. It is an art form. And people are typing everything. Everything's on a quirky on the keyboard, and so everybody is not used to writing anymore. It's an old-fashioned thing to do, but it's an interesting, fun thing to do if you want to just look into ideas to do with personality. And of course, there are some very specialised graphologists, people who do forensic graphology and help the police with all kinds of things to do with crime and anonymous letters and so forth, malicious letters and so forth. And I've done a little bit of that, but we're not going to go into that today. I'm going to show you some fun things to do in graphology. There are private colleges to do with graphologists, and people that employ other people often request a sample of writing from the candidate going for an interview. And it's beyond the CV. It goes further and beyond your qualifications and your CV. A graphologist will not be interested in what you've achieved in exams or what your specialist subjects might be or where your experience lies. They're more interested in you, the person, which is a bit like astrology and the characteristics of astrology. So it tells you a lot about yourself. It tells the person looking to see whether you've got certain personality aspects which will be suitable to the work that you're applying for. For instance, it might be a job where you're required to work in a very busy pool of people, and there's a lot of busyness going on around you, and you have to cope with a lot of sound and people talking. It might be in a call centre, a sales person, someone wanting to be good at selling. So there are certain things to look for, which I'll point out to you in a minute. Or the job might require that you have to work alone, somewhere quite quiet and maybe even isolated, and you have to be able to deal with your own company where there's not much communication going on. And some people can't deal with that. You know, they're climbing up the wall and they're bored to tears, or they need a bit of communication. So you can tell all sorts of things like that, which is in the personality, and other things too. What I'm going to show you today is a kind of light-hearted look at graphology. If you get your old Christmas cards out or your birthday cards or any letters and things, you can have a lot of fun looking at the signatures and the writing of birthday cards and things, and get some insights into people's the way people are and their personality. And this article What Does Your Handwriting Say About You was commissioned by a journalist who was freelance, and she was in an audience where I was giving a lecture way back to do with graphology, and everybody handed me a sample of handwriting, and then I would have a look at the writing and talk about the samples, and people would then verify, because they'd written it, they were there to say yes or no, this was right or wrong. And it was something I did over a period of 10 years, and it was very popular. And I did a lot of reports for individuals and reports for companies for handwriting characteristics. And on one programme on the BBC, I did famous people, and I wasn't told who they were. I was just given a sample of their writing and had to come up with their areas of expertise or their personality, actors, sports people and so on. So that proved to be quite good as well. And then there was another occasion where I was a guest speaker for the WI regional dinner way back in the Yorkshire area, and just for a kind of half an hour stint after the dinner, I did this little talk about graphology, and they were giving me samples of writing, and of course it was an all-female audience, and I got this sample of writing out of the box that they'd given me, and I thought, well, it was a photocopy, and that leaves doesn't give everything. If it's a photocopy, you don't get the pressure and so on. But the particular sample of writing, I thought, well, this I don't think is a member of the WI that's given this sample. So I began to describe the individual from the writing, and the words I used were that this person was intelligent, artistic, but also I felt they were very protective of a lot of people, could make very big decisions that would affect an awful lot of people, and that there was an artist in there, but there was also a soldier and a strategist, and there were words that went on to describe more of a masculine character, but someone who took responsibility very, very seriously. And there were some spelling mistakes, and it was very small writing, highly intelligent, and so on. So I'm going on with key words like this: soldier, artist, strategist, protector of people, negotiator, kind of fairly general words. And the chair lady stopped me and she said, "Dale, I have to stop you there." So I go all red and I'm very embarrassed. And she said, "Well, no, it's nothing wrong," she said, "but the writing that you're holding and describing belongs to Sir Winston Churchill." So I'd said some pretty key words just in that 5-minute period to do with this character of Winston Churchill. He was an artist, and he was also someone who suffered depression, and he was also the strategist and politician, soldier, etc. So key words that were coming out were, of course, nothing that would describe any of the ladies sitting in front of me at the WI. So this was just a highlight in my career where I'd had the confidence to stand up and say that out loud in public and get a response. And there was another occasion when I was in Ireland where I was given a sample of writing that was supposed to be somebody very, very important, but I didn't feel that it was that person, and said so live on air. And it turned out that I was right. I'd been set up, and people often set graphologists up to see what they're going to say, because they obviously are sceptical or cynical, and most times I've been able to prove people wrong, or prove graphology works. So to get on with it, this is the Symposium of Graphology that was held at Oxford University, 1987. So this is how long ago I was doing this. And I was a delegate at the first symposium that was held at Oxford, and met some very interesting people from all over the world that had done really serious research into graphology and how it works for the psychology of people, really. So that was another little bit of claim to fame, the first British Symposium of Graphological Research at St Edmund's Hall in Oxford. So I'll just put that on one side. that was my article, which was about compatibility between boss and secretary. In this case, it was two women. It was a lady boss and a lady secretary. And here's a little bit of a sample here that is written by the same person, and it looks completely different. And the article goes on to explain how a graphologist would look at that and know that it was the same person that had written that. So I can send people a copy of this article if they get in touch with me. It's quite interesting about how it's all worked out, and it goes into a lot of detail. So graphology is the handwriting analysis. Now, if you want to kind of play along with this at home and get a group of people in, first of all, I always request people to write something on unlined paper. And this sentence, "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog," has every letter of the English alphabet in it, and most people will know that have learnt typing or touch typing or shorthand. But this is "The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog," because it gives us all the letters, and we can see which area they form, where they form. And I've done a Dale Jackson version here of how to understand it. This is my way of doing it. It's not the School of Graphology's way of doing it or the Institute of Graphology's way of doing it. It's my way that I've developed because of my kind of way of looking at things. But I've drawn a little figure here, little matchstick man, and I've divided it into 3. Now, people that know about chakras and holistics and energies around the body, the mind, the body, the emotional and so on, the spiritual and emotional and the physical, the balance of those energies. You can see this in handwriting. You can see where the balance is in the energies. And to understand it, if we draw this little diagram, the head part, this part here, represents the upper zone. The middle part here we call the middle zone, and the bottom part we call the lower zone. Now, these 3 zones are important. You can divide handwriting into these 3 zones. If you draw an imaginary line, you'll have an upper, a middle and a bottom zone. So then you look at the formations and see what goes up into the top zone and what comes down into the lower zone, and how broad the middle zone is. And then you get the holistic balance, if that makes any sense to you. The other way to look at it is the top zone would be air, if we're looking at elements. The middle zone would be earth, I can't write upside down, earth, and water in the lower zone, the emotional part. And the fire would be the speed and the drive and the pressure that goes into the writing. So here's the little body, here's the person, and then we could have a look at whether they're writing, are they writing very broadly like this, where the writing is chunky and very much in the middle zone, where there's not very much up here or below the line. So the ratio will be all in the middle with 2 small points. Whereas this one, the top one, is more balanced. We've got more kind of a balance with down, middle and up. There's kind of an equal balance on this one. This one is all in the middle. And this is how a lot of children in Britain write today. And if you're in America or some other country, you might have been taught early at school a different style of writing, a cursive style, kind of more like these formations here, with lots of flourishes and lots of movement and rhythm, whereas the British schools are taught there's names for it, where it's more like printing. But when it's chunky in the middle like this is someone who is going to be materialistic, physical and down to earth. Now, if you want to relate that to the earth signs in astrology, that's one way you can pick up some characteristics from there. So here is a person who is not looking into the upper, higher imagination or the spiritual realm. They're not emotional. They're not coming below the line with much feeling. but they're just wanting what money can buy in the middle zone. They probably have lots of things, stuff, shoes, clothes, all sorts of things that they spent the money on. And that will be chunky letters in the middle zone with not much going up or down out of it. Short stems, down and up in the writing. The opposite to that would be the next one I've tried to illustrate, where we've got a lot of energy in the top zone, very little in the middle zone, and a lot in the bottom zone. So now our little man would have a small body here, and the energy would be like that. Where we've got this, the material world is not that significant to this person. They're not bothered about accumulating wealth, money, possessions. They're probably much more full of imagination, more humanitarian, looking at the broader picture, looking at life in a broad picture, the up zone, the down zone, kind of extending away from this rather self-orientated middle zone. And I did something over here, I think. So where we've got writing that goes to on a right-angled slant is forward thinking, running forward rather than backwards. This is someone who wants to get ahead all the time and is pushing forward and driving forward. When you get writing that leans backwards or to the left, to the right and to the left, these people are more cautious. They're more inclined to relate to the past, to the home, to the family, to mother, whatever, the past and the connections with the past. People that go with a right-hand slant are more relating to progress and getting forward. They're driven, and there's a lot of energy usually in the right-hand slant aspect of writing, and people make good salespeople, and they'll take the next opportunity and so on. When something's much more laid back, if we go to this one, Chris, here, very, very open writing, very, very laid back, very easygoing, very laid back, very quick and kind of fast and intelligent writing. Shows someone who's really quite easygoing and quite laid back, but you know, spot on, thinking on their feet and so on. Where it gets a little bit more tight and together, writing that's like this, very kind of close together and angled rather than lots of loops and curls. Then we've got someone with a very analytical mind, someone who is analysing and quite ruthless, and the writing is close together. This is spread out. So you can pick up a mood immediately, and that's fairly obvious here, but I've tried to make it fairly obvious in the demonstration of what I've got. Now, I did think there might be some famous signatures, but I couldn't find them at home, but I've kind of... There's a few things here to do with signatures. And this one here is a famous American signature. It's supposed to say Trump, Donald Trump, but if you see the angles, it's all very zigzag, zigzag, zigzag like this. There's no cursive lines, no round movements in the form of the letters. So that's fairly ruthless, and I should imagine someone to be in his position and to have got there in his life, he's had to make very analytical, business-like decisions, evidently. So this famous signature, which is all angles, says it all, really. You're fired, you know, this is it. No emotion, you're fired. Let's not get sentimental about this. So, so that was one thing I thought would be an interesting thing to point out. Now, I'm going to go back to my little body. Look at the balance. The upper zone would be the imagination, the clairvoyance, the psychic realm, the ambitious realm, the dreams and ambitions, the air area to do with the mind, and that will be top loops, everything that goes top loops. And where the top loop is bigger than the bottom loop in the writing, then you've someone with a wonderful imagination. Now, some people might not have anything much going on in the top zone. It might all be lower zone, bottom loops. So then we come to this emotional, the sexual and emotional base. So we've got the imagination and the psychic, the physical and the material, and now we've got the emotional, subconscious and sexual base. So we go to the lower zone, what we call the lower zone energies. That's any loops below the line. And people do all kinds of wonderful things with their loops below the line. Now I have a little saying, the bigger the loops, the bigger the appetite. So here we are. Big loops on the top will be a fantastic imagination. Lots of wonderful ideas going on there. Big loops below the line, here, these kind of big loops, which shows a lot of sexuality, a lot of emotion and feeling and subconscious kind of the sexual expression is important. So here I'm saying, right, the bigger the loop, the bigger the appetite. So now when you're looking at your Christmas cards and birthday cards, I'm not saying that the biggest loops on the lower zone is the local sex maniac in the neighbourhood. I'm not saying that, because you've got to put it together with an awful lot of other things to draw those sort of conclusions. But it shows that this person is a very deeply emotional, sexually sensitive, sensual personality. Whereas if it was just straight lines and quite analytical, with no loops and curls, just straight lines, then we've got someone much more detached, much more intellectual and detached, where these round loops and big loops like this show an all-encompassing, very possessive kind of form of expression, creative. So if we go to this column here, if I go to here, I've got lots of different Fs. The letter F is the one letter in the sentence that would cover all three zones, top, middle and bottom zone. So some people might be all top zone and no bottom zone. So they're all thought and ideas, and they cut off their feelings, or they're not going to express their feelings openly. On the other hand, it might be all bottom zone and not much top zone, and therefore there's much more feeling and drama and emotion in the bottom zone than there is in the top. So they're not going to use their imagination too much. They're going to go with how they feel and connect to the real world, from the feelings to the middle zone, not from the top zone to the middle zone. So this little ratio is quite important in how you express yourself. Where are you coming from? You're coming from good ideas and lots of inspirational things going on in the top zone. The real physical world, let's get on with the building blocks of life and accumulation and make money. And the bottom zone, how you feel, how you're emotional, how sensual you are, and so on. So there's a lot going on with this little diagram. If we come to some of these letters here, the letter G shows quite a lot of different expression. You might be taught a G where you close the loop at the base of the letter. That's how you might be taught, or you might just be taught a simple printed kind of a G. This one has no curve at all, so it's a straight line. So that's the detached person. These are more emotional. Now, as you go down the lower zone, there's someone here likes to go down quite aggressive, here assertive, and then softens up. So they assert themselves and then they go into a curve, which is taking a strong initiative and then softening up. And also this is quite complicated. This is going all over the place. It's going round the houses and back to get to where it's going. And this one is doing the same thing and going backwards on the strand down. So here we've got complicated people. We've got, I mean, they like tying knots. That's one thing. They like tying knots. It's on the lower zone. So what might that tell us? 50 Shades of Grey might come into that one. And then we might have an open kind of a letter where it's not closed on the G or the A or the O, where it's not closed up at all. And that's a very open book. Someone who's open, chatty, communicating, can't keep a secret. Now those who can keep a secret will close up their O's and A's very tightly. They'll make sure everything is connected and closed, or it won't be a nice round O. It'll be a squeezed O or a squeezed E, and they're very good people to keep confidentialities, keep secrets and so on. And then if we go a quick way, we'll have a look at the T's. How do you cross your letter T? And that might be the ordinary way you've been taught, across both sides. Or you might do a T where you just cross one side. So the more forward you are with your T stroke, more ahead you are. Some people don't connect the T cross to the stem. So they've got lots of ideas going on again, but they're not making the connection to the material physical world. So the ideas go to nothing. There might be a lot of them, and they weigh a lot of things up before they actually connect and make a physical manifestation of an idea. So that's that one. And then you get people who just do a little mark to on one stroke to the front or to the back for a letter T. Or again, you get the people that like to tie knots. And then you get the optimist going upwards, the pessimist going downwards, and then this one with a little umbrella as a cross. It shows a protectiveness, protective of people and situations. So there's an awful lot, putting all these little bits and pieces together to get an idea of your personality. The letter I, the capital letter I, would be an expression of your ego. So that's a straight line. I'm an uncomplicated person. Here I am, this is me. And then you get, well, this is me, but I'm just quite cautious and I'm going to make sure. So you put the top and the bottom on it. It's also quite a logical kind of formation to make, someone who's down to earth and logical. And then you get the more emotional type with a more on the top zone, although it's a capital letter. Or then you get the ones with more on the bottom zone and a curved style rather than a straight style. So these are more emotional. And then you get these kind of rhythmic kind of formations like music and rhythm, as opposed to quick, straightforward, analytical, logical, analytical, rhythmic, creative, emotional. So you can kind of see some of the differences, and the I, letter I in writing, will be how you express yourself, as would your signature. So here's some scribbled signatures. I've done that. That's very kind of tight and sharp and ruthless. That's kind of quite, you can see who that is, Charlie Brown in this case, all spelt out and clearly seen, so they're not hiding anything, as opposed to this kind of signature, which is just a kind of thread, not forming any letters at all, saying, well, I'm not going to reveal who I am. Here, these kind of signatures, they might do a fancy flourish for the first letter, and then tie it all up in knots, and then just a little flourish like that. So they're not going to be too open with who they are, or even straightforward with who they are. They might skate across things. Politicians often have writing like this, and they never answer the question, do they? They kind of skirt around it. And then you might get people with a very big initial letter, which is making the entrance, and quite extrovert in style, and then they just kind of they've made their entrance, they've made their presence felt. This one here, I've put Chris Brown here, and then I've brought this end over, wrapped it round like a blanket. They're wrapping themselves up, very protective, or they might underline something very firmly, asserting themselves and putting an underline on it. So there's lots of characteristics come out of just the signature, and the signature can be very, very different from the actual page of writing. So the graphologist will look for what you do that is different from the way you were taught to do it at school, how inventive you've become, whether you think for yourself. Here's a couple of letter A's where people start to do these kind of italicized A's, and they were probably taught more like that, and they develop something more graphic in the letter A's. The same with E. You might be taught to do a letter E like that and end up doing it like that. And these are more italicized letters or graphic formations. And of course artists and designers might do all these little fancy twiddles and affectations within their writing and flourishes here and there that were not taught at all on the blackboard, or the style that schools were taught with. In America, people do a very cursive style. We would call it more like copperplate, old-fashioned copperplate. These kind of loops and curls that the Americans do, round loops, and they do curved X's rather than crosses and so on. So these lovely features, and joining all the letters up together, shows concentration. It shows being able to start and finish something. If the letters break up in between each letter, then you have someone with a mind that's jumping all over the place. Eye dots that are very precise will be people with a very clear observation, and people who like do precision work. Eye dots where they're exactly where they should be, not over here or over there, or high or low, they're just exactly where they should be. Precision mind, engineering kind of mind, and some kind of straight formations in the logical forms. There's such a lot in handwriting analysis. So bold letters, big letters and big writing is the extrovert. Small, tiny letters are going to be more the introvert. And you've got an instant already about the difference in a character. So you have a look through some of the letters and cards and greeting cards and Christmas cards and have some fun. You might want to look for those who want a lot of sex and those who just think about it a lot. They're thinking about it, they're probably doing it. So if you want a compatibilities, if you've got two separate bits of handwriting and one of them's all top zone and the other one's all bottom zone, well, you've got a problem there. How do they meet in the middle real world? Because one of them's all in the fantasy world and the other's all in the deep sexual world, and we want to make a reality meet up in the middle zone. So compatibility reports are quite interesting to do. Sometimes it won't meet at all. Somebody's wishing and hoping and longing for all sorts of adventures to go on in their kind of expression of themselves on a sexual level, and they're more into the imagination. Others are saying, doesn't matter too much about the imagination, let's just get on with it. So there's some things there that you can look for in the handwriting analysis. I think that's enough for one day. Chris, I hope people have enjoyed some of